1310 WICH with Fishing Today. Whether it's in the ocean, on the pond, in the stream, or off the dock, it's all about fishing. Let's join Jesse Roach with Fishing Today on 1310 WICH.
Good morning, everybody, and happy opening day for the trout. I'm hearing there's lots of people next door over at Mohegan Park getting it done on this opening day, and today is all about the trout. With me on the other side of the glass, Rick Joseph. Good morning.
Yes, trout season. Hooray, it's finally here. Good morning to you, Jesse. How are you?
Great. How about you?
Good.
And, so we're going to get right into it. And Rick has your fishing news, your marine forecast, and then we are on with Chris McDowell, an EP biologist with Inland Fisheries, and is all things trout, everything you ever want to know. Plus, he's also going to get into the trout stamps that's going through legislation, that proposal to allow the DEEP to do trout stamps, and we'll tell you all about it. So let's get into some news.
Yeah, okay, and a little chilly for the anglers this morning. I hope they bundled up, those who got out early this morning. Okay, for the news in fishing this morning, high flows may affect opening day fishing in some areas. Word is that fishing lakes and ponds and smaller rivers and streams may be the best alternatives for most anglers today as trout season opens today, beginning at 6 o'clock this morning. Department of Environmental Protection says the state's rivers, streams, and lakes and ponds have been stocked and they're ready. Approximately 400,000 trout have been released this spring and are awaiting opening day anglers today. DEP's spring trout stocking effort began in late February and will continue through the end of May. And when the spring stockings are complete, DEP says they expect to have stocked 101 lakes and ponds and 200 rivers and streams throughout the state with over 700,000 trout.
It's a lot of fish.
Yeah, well, gives you a better chance of catching one, right?
Oh, yeah.
You going out today?
I probably am. I have all the gear in my car.
You're ready to go. Well, dress warm. It's going to be chilly out there, too. And a little breezy. All right, the marine forecast. Want to do that now?
Sure.
Okay, Long Island Sound east of New Haven, Connecticut. Small craft advisory in effect from 6 o'clock this evening through late tonight. For that breeze to pick up later on today. East wind around 5 knots today, increasing 10 to 15 knots with gusts up to 20 knots. Seas at 1 foot or less at 1 to 2 feet this afternoon. Chance of rain and slight chance of snow for this afternoon. And then for tonight, northeast wind 10 to 20 knots, becoming northwest after midnight. Gusts up to 30 knots and seas at 2 to 4 feet. Chance of rain and snow in the evening. And then northeast wind for Sunday at 15 to 20 knots, becoming westerly at 10 to 15 knots in the afternoon. Seas tomorrow 2 to 3 feet. And it's the marine forecast for this weekend. Good luck, fishermen and anglers. Good luck out there this weekend.
And, everyone's having a good time. Don't forget, 16 is what you need to get your license, and you can do that online and visit any place that sells licenses, usually fishing shops, tackle shops, I think even Walmarts and stuff like that. So just to make sure you are covered out there on the day. And we're going to get into an interview with Chris McDowell. With us today is Chris McDowell. He's a biologist with Inland Fisheries here in Connecticut on this very important day, opening day. So we want to get all of our questions answered and really get some good information out there to the public. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Hey, good morning. Thank you.
And we'll get right to it. We've got not much time to cover a lot of things. But what is happening with the legislature in regard to adding the trout stamps to licenses? And could you give us a summary of those actions taking place, and what exactly does that mean for Connecticut anglers?
Yeah, absolutely. So briefly, a synopsis of the current bill regarding trout stamps. The original trout stamp bill was approved on March 16th of this year by the Environmental Committee, in what's termed a joint favorable substitute, meaning they inserted some substitute language into the bill. The substitute language didn't really change the trout stamp provisions, but it did add provisions to address some hunting stuff. So, for example, a provision was added from another of our bills that would correct a drafting error from 2014, the Public Act 14-201, which was the act that reduced fees for 16 and 17-year-olds by 50%. And then they added another provision concerning pheasant stamps and migratory bird permits and stuff like that. The next step in the life of this bill was the preparation by two legislative offices of what's called a file copy. This includes a fiscal note and a bill analysis prepared by two of the legislature's offices. They were the Office of Fiscal Analysis and the Office of Legislative Research. This is the bill now that the legislatures will get to vote on. So this version has been prepared, and now the bill sits on the Senate calendar awaiting their action. And their actions could be either to vote on it, ignore it, or send it back to another committee. And the session ends on May 4th. So really what this bill means for Connecticut anglers is, so if the trout stamp bill was passed, it would authorize DEEP to adopt regulations to create a trout stamp that would need to be purchased at a cost not to exceed $10 by anglers wishing to fish for trout, and those proceeds would go back into the hatchery system. What is important to know is that if this bill passes, it does not establish a trout stamp per se, but what it does is it simply provides DEEP with the ability to develop a trout stamp through the normal regulatory process, which will ultimately require review and approval by the Legislative Regulation Review Committee. There'll be public hearings and such. So basically, this bill is allowing us to start the process, if we choose, to create a trout stamp.
So it'll be a long way off in any case.
Yes.
And as far as people concerned about fishing for trout, then it should almost be a welcome increase that it is going to fisheries and that it will preserve the trout fishing for all of us.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And getting into today that we are starting our season, can you give us a breakdown of regulations? I know it changes from place to place, the minimum size, creel limits, and what are some of the differences in regulations based on locations, and how can anglers go find out what they are before they actually go out to the site?
Sure. So what I'll do is I'll stick strictly talking about trout for this.
Yes.
So in terms of trout, Connecticut has basically 7 different management types. The third one of them is trout management areas, known as TMAs, and these are high-quality fisheries offering year-round opportunities. We have trout parks, which are easy to fish and are frequently stocked. We have trophy trout streams, which are stocked with a higher proportion of larger fish. We have sea-run trout streams, which are areas where DEEP is working to establish populations of anadromous brown trout. Then we have 3 classes of wild trout management areas, which are WTMAs. So there's a Class 1, which has abundant wild trout and is not stocked with hatchery fish. We have Class 2s, which have wild trout and are stocked with some hatchery fish, such as fry and fingerlings. And then we have Class 3s, which has some wild trout, but is also stocked with catchable-size adult trout and fingerling-sized trout from our hatcheries. We also have trout management lakes, which are lakes that have the right water temperature, habitat, and forage species to allow trout to hold over once they're stocked. And then we have really non-management areas that simply have statewide regulations with them. So all those management areas that I listed have specific regulations attached to them and times that you can fish. Some may be open year-round, some may open right at opening day and close at a certain time. Because there is such a number of management types, as well as numerous other fisheries management waters that are managed for other species such as bass, northern pike, walleye, and channel catfish in Connecticut, the best way to find out what a particular regulation is for a water body is anglers should consult their 2016 Angler's Guide and look at the specific water body they are intending to fish and see if there are any special regulations that apply. If a special season or regulation isn't listed for a particular water body or for a species that they're looking to target, then the angler should go ahead and consult page 25 of the Angler Guide and see what the statewide regulation is for that species.
And we should note that the Angler Guide is also available online through a PDF form.
Absolutely.
If you have Adobe, and is a free thing. So if you can't get to a licensing center, then by all means go online, find it at the DEEP site, and go ahead and download that for yourself.
Absolutely. That is definitely one of our options that we have, and with people having smartphones and iPhones and things like that, you can actually bring it up right on your phone while you're out there and have the guide right at your fingertips.
Great, and I think I saw it's kind of the one generalized rule I think I saw was that from February 28th through opening day, there's just no keeping any fish.
Correct. Well, not necessarily. That applies to trout.
Yes. Trout that we're speaking of. Yes.
Yes. If you were to go fishing in some of our other lakes that are open year round, then that don't get directly stocked with trout, then the regulations for that water body would apply.
Okay, yeah, just so people are aware, because a lot of people think, okay, well, December 31st, they're not fishing until April, but the fact is there's a lot of, like you're saying, the trophy management areas, catch and release, you take the picture and let it go.
Yep, but there, ice fishing is a big thing in Connecticut when we actually have, some decent ice, and there are a large number of people that can harvest their fish while they're out there, as long as they're following the regulations that are specific for that water body.
Sure. And talking about different water bodies, what are the variety of trout species that anglers can expect to catch, and how do the species change with different bodies of water?
Okay, so in Connecticut we stock 4 different trout species. We stock brook trout, brown trout, rainbow trout, and tiger trout. And the tiger trout is a hybrid trout consisting of a cross between a brown trout and a brook trout. So most of the waters that we stock with trout receive a mix of brook trout, brown trout, and rainbow trout. But certain management waters receive specific species or strains of trout for certain reasons. So there's, not enough time to go into every location that's a management area getting specific stuff. But for example, in locations where we know there are native brook trout populations or self-reproducing brown trout populations, we try to avoid stocking hatchery trout of the same species on top of these reproducing populations. And therefore we would typically stock, say, rainbow trout.
Sure.
Certain trout management lakes, for example, receive a special strain of brown trout known as a cephalorellin, because this strain of brown trout has been found to do very well in lakes.
Yeah, I noticed that there was a couple of seasons back, a few of the lakes even around here. I know in Chester there was that lake, and I think Long Pond.
Yep.
Were a couple that it was a mad dash because before the ice came in, and we were all out there on the boats chasing them around. My friend Jimmy actually had a nice one up at Long Pond, a nice picture that was actually used in some of the brochures and magazines. It's pretty cool.
That's awesome. I love to hear things like that the fish that we've put out, anglers are able to catch and enjoy.
All right, we'll have more with Chris McDowell right after the break, right here on Fishing Today on WICH.
The belly flattener Nubiotics is in an epic battle with the competition to be the best belly flattening product on the market. To prove they're the best, they're giving away free trials to everyone who calls in the next 10 minutes. 1-800-991-7980. Nubiotics has what it takes to win. It's scientifically formulated to flatten bloated bellies fast by cleansing pounds of rotting food and toxic sludge from your body. Made with natural ingredients, it even combats periodic heartburn and acid reflux. But to win, Nubiotics can't just be the best. It's got to prove it's the best. That's why they're giving away free trials to anyone, male or female, who's looking for maximum belly flattening in minimum time. Again, Nubiotics is in an epic battle to be the best belly flattening product on the market. To win, they're giving away free trials to everyone who calls in the next 10 minutes. So hurry. Call now for details. 1-800-991-7980. If lines are busy, try again. 1-800-991-7980. That's 1-800-991-7980.
Richard here, H&R Block Tax Pro. April 15th is not the last day to file your taxes. That's right, America. The tax gods have smiled on you because this year's deadline is April 18th. That's 3 extra days for H&R Block to help you get every credit and deduction you deserve. Appointments are filling up quickly, so make yours now or come in soon. It's still refund season, America, but not for long.
Not everyone gets a refund. For details, visit hrblock.com.
With OnStar, you don't need to drive the newest model car to have the latest in connectivity. If you're not connected, now get select OnStar services free for 3 years with no strings attached. You'll get a mobile app that lets you start your car or unlock your doors from your phone, and monthly diagnostic email reports. Just push the blue OnStar button and ask for 3 years of free mobile app and diagnostic services. Emergency and security services are not included. Eligible on select 2011 and newer vehicles. Visit OnStar.com for details, coverage map, and system limitations.
What about budget cuts? How is the Fisheries Department doing, and how can the anglers get involved in protecting the program? And the second question to that is, do license fee revenues go back to the program? Is that protected from the general fund?
Okay, so in terms of budget cuts, it's really a changing landscape every day in Connecticut right now. We are having some difficult fiscal times in Connecticut, but though there may be some trimming within DEP due to the recent budget cuts, currently we do not anticipate any immediate concerns this fiscal year that ends June 30th. We don't really know what's going to happen after that, but currently DEP has been able to find savings from a number of positions that have been left vacant and have gone unfilled. So the ways in which anglers can participate during these difficult budget times is to pay attention to what's going on in the legislature and get involved in the legislative process. By this I mean they should be regularly contacting their legislature and voicing their support for the Fisheries Division and the programs that we provide. And they should voice their concerns about the impacts to cuts to the Fisheries Division would have on them. Anglers can also help by continuing to support the Fisheries Division by continuing to buy their fishing licenses annually. And in terms of your other question of license fee revenues going to the program or to the general fund, it's basically yes to both of those questions. So I'll explain that. So basically the money from permits and fees, like your license, your fishing license and your hunting license, does go to the general fund. However, it's not a black hole because there are state and federal requirements that those dollars have to get returned to our agency. The federal government has mandated through law that the equivalent and more of the money obtained from permits, fees, and licenses gets transferred back to our programs.
Oh, great.
There's very stringent reporting requirements that are overseen by the federal government so that this money that anglers, pay for to buy their fishing licenses is used what it is specifically intended for and not siphoned off to other areas of the general fund budget.
That's great. So at least it is covered and there is checks and balances, because I know that's a question a lot of anglers have in buying their license is to make sure that the trout program is preserved, especially when we had that last threat where they were talking about canceling it. And us as anglers are saying, well, wait a minute here. We paid for these licenses. You can't take that. So I'm glad to know that the federal government has stepped in to make sure and guarantee that that does happen. And on a future show, we're going to talk about the CARE program that you and I had talked about prior to, and so the public can also get involved that way to protect what we have going on here.
Absolutely, that's terrific.
And now, talking about the different species, and you're saying the mixes between the natives and the stock, how can we tell the difference between a native and a farm stock trout?
So one of the best ways to do this, and it can be kind of difficult, is to look at the fins of the trout that you catch. Mm-hmm. So hatchery-raised trout fins are typically worn and rounded on the edges, which is due to the rubbing up against the sides of these concrete holding tanks that they're in. So our hatcheries have either concrete raceways, which kind of look like big, deep concrete troughs, or we have concrete or steel pools that the fish are in, and they swim around in circles, and as they're swimming around, the fins are rubbing up against the sides or they're rubbing up against the bottom, and so they get kind of worn. They get some scar tissue on them. They look kind of wavy. Whereas if you have a wild trout, those fins look like what we say is very clean. There's little to no scar tissue on them. They just look very picturesque, very pristine. And if you were to hold a wild trout and a hatchery trout next to each other, you would be able to tell instantly the difference between the two.
Yeah, I go and doing stream and creek fishing myself. I've caught a few native brook trout, and these colors are just amazing.
Yep.
And then I think the anal fin there at the bottom is longer, or it seems longer, like you were talking about with the rubbing and everything. But the colors are just incredible. I always make sure to let those go, for sure.
Yep.
But it's pretty cool to see a native when you catch one.
It is, and one of our hatcheries, the Kensington hatchery, they have some ponds that are earthen ponds, so they're dirt ponds. And the fish that come out of there look really great. I mean, they have terrific colors. They have very good fins, and that's where our sea forellen strain brown trout comes out of. And when we stock those into the lake, they just, the brown trout, they're dark brown. The spots are great. The red dots on them are amazing, and they look, very, very close to being wild fish.
Nice. Are you expecting to do a sea forellen release this year?
Yes, we will have, during the in-season, we do have some sea forellen trout that we're going to be putting out. The numbers have yet to be determined, but we will be doing in some of our lakes around Connecticut some sea forellen stocking. Yep.
Great. And now another thing, we talk about regulation, and some people might not know the difference between a salmon and a trout, because some of these rivers, especially if you get out to the Farmington or probably out that direction, have a mix of the two.
Yes. So trying to tell the difference between an Atlantic salmon and a trout can be difficult. And typically, the adult Atlantic salmon is very difficult to distinguish from an adult brown trout. Telling the difference between an Atlantic salmon adult and a brook trout and a rainbow trout is much easier because of the color patterns. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to Atlantic salmon adults and brown trout adults, that's where people kind of get hung up. So the most reliable distinguishing feature, and some folks are probably going to chuckle at this, is the nature of the teeth on the roof of the mouth of the fish. So in Atlantic salmon, the teeth on the center roof of the mouth are in a single row and are more weakly developed than those of a brown trout. So what I mean by this is if you were to stick your finger in the mouth of an Atlantic salmon and put it on the roof of its mouth and pull your finger out, pull it out along those teeth, you'll only get kind of like a slight abrasion on the pad of your finger. Mm-hmm. If you were to do this with a brown trout, your finger will likely come back fairly cut up because the brown trout's teeth are quite sharp up there.
Yeah, I've seen the V, like a V row that they have up on the roof of their mouth. Yeah. Yeah,
and another characteristic is that you can tail a salmon as opposed to a brown trout. And what I mean by that is if you were to catch a salmon and you grabbed right in front of its tail, you could pick that fish up by the tail. If you try to do that with a brown trout, you can't, because it's just not, you can't get your hand around it. It's not a good handle to grasp on. Mm-hmm. So those are the two really good ways to tell the difference of an adult Atlantic salmon and a brown trout.
Yeah, because the only way I knew prior was the mouth. I think one is longer, like one ends under the eye and one goes beyond the eye is the only thing I ever really had in mind. I've never had to use that identification, unfortunately. But that's something I thought I saw a while back. I don't know if that still stands, but what you're saying is much more specific.
Yeah, the teeth are really the go-to, because when the fish start getting bigger, and in Connecticut, we typically stock like two or three stages of, I think it's going to be like 2 stages of adult salmon. So we have broodstock salmon that come out of Kensington that we put in the Naugatuck River and the Shetucket River in the fall. Mm-hmm. And those are really big salmon. Those are pushing, between 2 to 20 pounds.
Oh, great.
We also do some limited lake stockings with those fish in the fall, so Crystal Lake or Mount Tom Pond in the west. And then if there's enough, we may go to either Mashapog Lake, Beach Pond, and we usually figure out another lake in the west. And then for the Farmington River, they typically stock fry, salmon, which then grow out to be smolts, which are, anywhere from like 5 to 8 inches, things like that. So trying to tell the difference between a small salmon and a big trout can be kind of difficult, because now some of those features are a little bit difficult to tell. But, I mean, when big brown trout and big salmon are in the same place, you really need to use the teeth method to make sure you get it right.
And then also to talk about lures, I mean, for a salmon, at least in the Shetucket, from what I know, is a swivel, single hook, no trebles.
Yes.
Right. So that's important to know.
Yeah, so if folks are going to go broodstock Atlantic salmon fishing, on page 28 of the Angler Guide, this year's 2016 Angler Guide, they have the seasons, creel limits, and methods for when you can go for Atlantic salmon, which is basically from the period December 1st to March 31st, and they have all the regulations for the rivers and the lakes and ponds where you would find Atlantic salmon.
Great. Well, hey, thanks, Chris McDowell, biologist with the Inland Fisheries. Thanks so much for your time on this opening day. I know you're going to be busy today. So, have a great day out there, and hope you see lots of successful anglers.
Absolutely, and we will be out. Our entire staff is going to be out and around the state talking to anglers, checking to see who's fishing. We are going to be sending out some hatchery trucks to go to some of our trout parks. So we'll be going to Wharton Brook, Chatfield Hollow State Park, Black Rock, and Southford trout parks. So look out for those trucks. And I hope everyone has a safe, fun, and good time out there on opening day.
All right. Thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, no problem, Jesse. Have a good one.
You too. And we are out of time. I want to thank Rick Joseph on the other side of the glass, and for you for joining us.
Listening.
And we'll see you next week right here on Fishing Today on WICH. We'll have a podcast available on the webpage. Have a great week, everyone. Tight lines. Good luck with the trout.